Alien Covenant. Now, it's no surprise to anyone to say that Alien Covenant was not the success that Ridley Scott or the producers at Fox were hoping for, and I think this has had most to do with how they treated the Xenomorph in the story, and or how specifically Ridley Scott decided that the Xenomorph was now going to be originated from. Now, in the movie, and also in interviews, Ridley Scott has said that it is not the engineers that have created the Xenomorphs, but actually David himself, the android. And this is shown throughout the movie by him creating an eggs and also the embryos at the end of the film.
And I'm in process then of planning Covenant. We've got to reintroduce him. So we took on a different direction. The engineers didn't make him, David made him, which I thought was far more interesting.
Now, as the title suggests, it's a very kind of clickbait idea, I know, that how do we fix that? Now, I've recently figured out a really easy solution to solving this issue with the movie, and basically without changing anything major with the plot, or even the ending, for that matter. And my thoughts are only about adds maybe 5 minutes extra to the runtime, and I'll be going through how this alternate version of the movie would play out in the specific scene. Now, up until the part where Captain Oram stumbles on David with the Neomorph, everything would be pretty much the same, minus a couple aesthetic things which I will go into. But the main thing is that instead of the room after David shows Captain Oram the bestiary room with all the things, and I will put up an image now of that, David instead takes him to an egg room, but it's a different egg room, where it's more like the inside of the original derelict ship. And much like the original Prometheus movie, there is inscriptions and a shrine on the wall, and not of the big head thing that was in the Prometheus, but of a Xenomorph. And we can see that this is definitely a Xenomorph, and it looks like it, and obviously everything that goes along with it. And while they're walking towards the eggs, or to maybe even the eggs in another room or in a smaller area, maybe downstairs from this main room, Captain Oram can say something about, "What is this room? What is all this?" And David could start explaining that the engineers fought a war against two factions of themselves, and that the both sides had used the Xenomorph as a weapon, because the reason why they have the shrine is because they worship the alien Xenomorph, believing, much like how Ash says in Alien, that it's a perfect organism or a divine creature, as I think they would probably translate it to such, because organism is a very kind of, scientific word, and I don't know if the engineers would have that. And so the idea is that the alien creature, the stuff that we see in Alien and Aliens and such, doesn't actually come from David, and instead is a extinct race now, at the time of the film, of some ancient species, more ancient than even the engineers, and the engineers, they didn't create it. They didn't create the Xenomorph. But what they recognized was that the Xenomorph was a pure creature. And so, while they're having this war that I mentioned about, they're using the aliens on both sides and as a weapon. Sort of, I guess, a comparison could be made to like how Genghis Khan threw plague-ridden horses and corpses over the walls of sieges with diseases to inspire people to get infected amongst the populace of the besieged. Much in the same way they would introduce an alien into the engineers and so basically wipe it out. Unfortunately, for the engineers, that is, this weapon turned against them, and there was a great cataclysm and basically almost wiped out the entire race of engineers. And so what I'll later explain to about is the in-depth about like the history kind of thing, but what David is saying is that something on the lines of their weapon, their sword, was ironically turned against them. And he makes some, snide comment about being superior about it. And this takes us to the black goo and the canisters. And so at the aftermath of this, they didn't want to completely get rid of their whole access to the xenomorphs, but they knew they were too dangerous. So they quarantined all the worlds off that were infected and let them die. And instead they created the canisters and the black goo from the essence of the xenomorphs. And I think that's a very clever way to explain why the xenomorphs and all the neomorphs and stuff sort of similar to the xenomorph design and shape, but not actually the xenomorph. Now this gets to what David is. So David, he doesn't create the xenomorph. He is creating an imitation of the xenomorph, the original creation. And that's why he has the eggs in the shrine room with the other xenomorph, because he's trying to create this perfect organism. And the idea is that the engineers now have been trying to use the black goo, or that's what the engineers on the Prometheus world were trying to do, was create a xenomorph and a perfect weapon, so this organism. And, some religious thing about that as well, to kind of tie it into the religious symbolism of the movies. And David, having this kind of god complex over humanity, he'll sort of see it as ironic and his destiny, I guess you could say, that he should make the perfect organism rather than the engineers, and thus proving that he is better than both his creator and also his creator's creator, which I think is a bunch of kind of poetic irony or something. Actual poetic, not correct. Poetic irony is correct here. But even more ironically is that this imitation he makes isn't actually all it's chalked up to be. Shown in the rest of the movie, in the climax, the protomorph, so that comes from the egg and from Orm, it may be more aggressive, but it's also very dumb. It jumps at the claw thing that jumps down on it, and is overall not perfect. And I think Walter in the movie sums it up very cleverly by saying that when one chord is off in the symphony, everything is in disarray, which I think really would have been a perfect way for Ridley Scott to introduce this idea that he's not actually making a xenomorph, and he's actually making a kind of Frankenstein-like abomination. And so after David has done this, and it's established in Prometheus that David can speak the engineer's language, and he also can read it, and he's also had 15 or so years on the planet, so he's obviously had time to read through the inscriptions, and he knows exactly what they're saying. And of course he's not telling Orm that exactly, but he's just saying, brief things to try and get him more interested. Then he brings him down to the eggs, and he gets facehugged like the rest of the movie. And then the rest of the movie plays out, and even the ending. And I may be wondering, why not change the ending? Well, I think it's not necessary at this point, because I think people's main problem was the ending, but because of the implications, not because of the actual ending itself. Like, personally, I like the idea that David sneaked onto board. It's a little bit dumb, but who cares at this point, for the sake of the argument, to try and keep it down to as limited changes to the plot of the movie as possible. Saying that David instead now, he is actually just propagating a species of aliens that are inferior to the actual Xenomorph, to what we find in Alien and Aliens, and so on and so forth, and is why that those aliens, the ones that David created, cannot survive really for long without David. Not in a sort of like they will die if David's not around them, but I mean that David has done the best he can to try and support them, and they still get killed in every by the human characters. So that they lack intelligence and they don't have that survival instinct that the aliens are known for, which I think is probably the big flaw of David's creation. And so instead of David now going off with the progenitors of the alien race, he's going off with some imitation abomination of the aliens into this colony world, and he's experimenting, thinking he's a god when he's not. And in my opinion, I think that's probably the easiest way to fix the whole series, because then it actually, if we look back into Alien and the derelict ship with the space jockeys, you can almost say that, so the idea is that the space jockey is actually one of, unfortunately got infected by by a facehugger when transporting them over through in the war or something, and then crashed on LV-426 and eventually succumbed to the Xenomorph. And it also then retains the alien nature of the alien, which is one thing, like, my biggest gripe with Alien Covenant was that, people, when Aliens came out, were saying, oh, it ruins the aliens, it turns them into a bug, kind of thing with the whole Queen stuff. And then Ridley Scott's here going in like, oh yeah, it's created by a fucking android. It's just sort of like, okay, you're doing this to me, you're saying this? Are you saying it's more interesting if David creates them? Okay, it's interesting in a way, but I think not in the way you're hoping. Ridley Scott's kind of gone a little bit bonkers at this point. Anyways, but overall, so the alien species then is actually more alien. It retains the initial quality that made it so scary in the first place, was that we had no idea what it was, how it really interacted, and all these things. And now that Alien is such a cultural icon, you can still have that fear of the unknown, which the original Alien instilled on people, through this kind of unique thing where you could explore it in a future Alien movie perhaps, or some other extended universe comics, whatever, books, where we talk about where does the alien actually come from. And we know where we come from now with the engineers and stuff, and that's kind of whole interaction, but we don't know where the aliens come from. And they're so ancient and so alien and so distant from us that I think it adds a layer of terror and anticipation about, and no, not anticipation, a new dimension to the alien creature that I think has been lacking since the prequel movies came out, since Alien Covenant. I will state before I go that I actually do really enjoy watching Alien Covenant as a film. I think it's a good film, but a good Alien film it is not. And for reasons stated before about the ending mostly is the main point, and the lack of continuity with Prometheus and stuff. So that's my point, and I hope you guys enjoyed what I've had to say, and please tell me if you agree or disagree, and if you think that my idea is tell me if anyone else have had this idea, because I haven't seen it around. Anyways, thanks for watching, see ya.